That's a bit of a mouthful. I'll be saying ESTIMA many times during this presentation for short. We also support Canada's participation in the International Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, which is EITI for short, and I'll also be using that acronym today. Today, we're going to share more about our efforts to open up mining, oil, and gas data. We'll introduce the ESTIMA to start off, some of the recent developments, and then I'll turn it over to Jacques, who will explain a bit more about the portal itself. So let's just get into it. We'll start off with introducing the ESTIMA. So just a quick timeline to show you from the beginning in 2013, the initial G8 commitment, and I'll bring you forward to today where we are a fully funded program. Now to start out, the ESTIMA came out of a G8 commitment, which is now the G7. Canada committed to supporting international efforts to deter corruption in the global extractive sector. This required us to implement reporting requirements for oil, gas, and mining companies to make government revenues from natural resources transparent to the public. 32 jurisdictions have enacted similar legislation, including in Quebec, and we work closely with the government of Quebec through an MOU to jointly share lessons on implementation and related to compliance. The US also has a rule that came into force very recently, and the first reports are expected in September 2024. So what is ESTIMA? The Extractive Sector Transparency Measures Act is a piece of federal legislation that came into force in 2015. NRCan is responsible for administering and implementing this act. It requires companies that are engaged in the commercial development of oil, gas, and mining that are either listed on a Canadian stock exchange or meet specific size thresholds to report the payments they are making to governments in Canada and around the world. Now, when I say payments, I mean things like taxes, royalties, infrastructure improvement payments, bonuses, etc. And reporting is annual, so very regular, and within 150 days of companies' end of their financial year. The reports are submitted to us, and entities must also publish these on their websites on a publicly accessible website. And all of this information is now available through the data portal that we'll show you later in this presentation. As of 2017, payments to Indigenous governments are also in scope of this act. So following the launch phase of our program, we were subject to an internal audit and evaluation that said we needed to be doing more on compliance monitoring and data accessibility. As a result, we increased efforts to improve implementation and enforcement of this act. These efforts led to us being named in Budget 2022, and our office was established, the Extractive Sector Transparency Office. In addition to ESTIMA, the EITI was assigned to our office. The EITI is an international initiative with over 50 countries, and it requires annual reporting on a wide set of issues around good governance and natural resources. It involves both government, civil society, and companies. And with both of these in our office, we are able to push best practices at an international level, and Canada is widely seen as the gold standard when it comes to mandatory reporting, specifically of this type of information. More recently, both EITI and ESTIMA were named in the Canadian Critical Mineral Strategy as key efforts to improve transparency and traceability in the critical mineral supply chain. So that's my quick overview. I'll turn it over to Jacques, who's going to show you the data portal and explain how we developed it.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you. So I'm Jacques. I'm an analyst in the Extractive Sector Transparency Office. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm the lead on the Data Portal initiative. I'll be giving you some context on the Data Portal as well as a demo and some things that we're working on for the future. So first of all, I'll talk about the rationale for creating the Data Portal. So it was developed to address a number of issues, including maintaining access to ESTIMA reports. So our previous solution was to post links on our website, which linked to reports on companies' websites. So these websites would often go down and stakeholders would lose access to ESTIMA reports. Oftentimes the reports would be inaccessible for long periods of time. As companies, we would notify companies of the issue and they would fix their links. So in addition, the departmental evaluation that Emily previously mentioned underscored that the data should be easier to access. So this was echoed by a number of our stakeholders. The data portal would enable users to navigate our data with much more ease than the previous model, and it would allow them to consolidate data from reports without having to consult each individual report. So several options were considered in order to increase our data's accessibility. So for example, we considered a download to Excel or CSV button on our website, as well as some internal solutions to NRCan and other third-party applications were also put forward during some discussions and considered. But ultimately, we went with a Power BI solution in collaboration with Statistics Canada. This was selected due to its versatility, the ease of which it can be maintained and updated, and from an end-user standpoint, it also offered the best and modern and intuitive user experience. So NRCan and the Extractive Sector Transparency Office are proud to have an interdepartmental relationship with StatCan. So this slide shows how the data is prepared by NRCan and pushed to public-facing websites through a StatCan dissemination mechanism. So this process ensures that the data is uploaded in a timely manner, and our agreement with StatCan is structured to support continuous improvement to the portal itself. The data visualization is refreshed at a minimum every 2 weeks per our service standards, but we generally aim to update it each week. So these 3 areas of focus outline how we ensure data quality in the ESMA database, which adds value to the data portal by ensuring data integrity and validity. So we do some initial checks when we receive reports. We also do dataset-wide analyses to detect and correct anomalies within the database. And we do in-depth compliance reviews of companies to verify their compliance with our legislation based on a detailed annual risk rating process. So before we dive into a demo of the portal and I show you where to find it and how it works, I wanted to make a note of the process to prepare the data that goes into the portal. So while report links and reports as they are accepted by our team are the main source of data for the portal, we do take a number of steps to make sure that the portal creates the most value for our stakeholders. So first, we standardize payee names so that payments to specific governments can be consolidated across a number of ESMA reports. So in my little example here, you can see that the various ways of referring to provincial government of Alberta, as an example, on reports that are received by our office are standardized into province of Alberta. So on the data portal itself, you'll only find province of Alberta, but can refer to the various ways that it was submitted on ESMA reports, such as government of Alberta, Alberta government, Alberta provincial government. So we understand that these all mean province of Alberta on the portal. The ESMA data portal is also available in French and English. So to support this, we've translated reports, namely payee names. It should be noted that report notes and project names were not translated. The ESMA data portal also displays all payment values in Canadian dollars. So to support this, reports payments were translated to Canadian dollars using the exchange rate in the ESMA report. And lastly, as entities are only required to post their reports on a publicly accessible website for 5 years after they've submitted it, any report that was submitted over 5 years ago is removed from the data set before the data is made available in the portal. So now we will get into a demo of the portal. So we officially launched it in September of 2022. We released an enhanced version this year, also in September, so pretty much exactly 1 year after. The enhanced portal is what we will be looking at today, and it was in response to user experience survey feedback, which I'll talk about a little bit more later on in the session. So we also did a number of testing events internally with industry and civil society before we launched it. So this is the landing page of the data portal, the overview page. So it provides highlights of the data that's contained within the portal. You'll notice a date at the top right that shows you when the data was last updated. So our service standards, again, are to update it every 2 weeks. And note the address at which the portal can be accessed at the very top right of the slide. So for those of you on laptops or at home on your computers, you can use this link in order to follow along with the presentation. So that's nrcan.gc.ca/esma.data, or -data. Okay, so the overview page enables users to navigate to each of the 4 subsections of the data portal. So those 4 subsections are countries, payees, entities, and projects. So these sections can be accessed by clicking on the dark blue browse buttons that you can see. So now we'll go through the portal section by section and also show you some of its features. So the first page we'll look at is the countries page. So the countries page shows data by continents, regions, and countries. It enables users to easily view and aggregate data by countries, regions, and continents. When hovering over a country, users can see data summaries pertaining to that specific country on a tooltip or pop-up box, like you can see on the screen. The map on the countries page is also zoomable and it enables panning with a simple click and drag, and it offers an easy way to target countries with smaller land masses. The click and drag also makes it very intuitive and familiar to use. We can also adjust the filters at the top of the countries page to isolate specific countries, continents, as well as specific entities. So as you can see, it automatically and dynamically adjusts the totals in the light blue section as we make filter selections. Finally, the reset filters button will return us to the default view, which is again just an unfiltered view. There you go. The countries page also includes a table view, which can be accessed by clicking the table view button at the top right. So here we have the same filters as on the map view. We can isolate years, add, remove countries or entire continents from our filter selections. In this view, we can drill down to payment categories as well as specific companies in the table at the bottom. And I wanted to make a quick note here that throughout the data portal, we always have the possibility to export the data that's being represented in tables like this one. So we can do this by clicking the 3 little dots and clicking on export data in the list that appears, like you can see on the screen. We can navigate back to the map view from here by clicking on the map view button at the top right of the page. So now we'll move on to the payees page. So for context, payees refers to the government that's receiving the payment. So payees can be in the context of the ESMA governments, groups of multiple governments, or any body that performs the functions of a government. So what this means in simple terms is that this will include data on federal, provincial, municipal, and indigenous governments in Canada and around the world. This page shows data by payees. So here we can select multiple payees using this filter. The chart is dynamic, meaning that it updates as we make filter selections. This page also features a table view at the bottom, which again, we can export to CSV as we saw on the previous page by clicking on the 3 little dots. Additionally, the drop-down filter at the top of the page lets you filter for payees in specific geographic locations. So if we filter for Canada here as an example, we can see that the chart updates automatically and only shows payments to payees in Canada. So next up is the entities page, which shows a summary of all reports and all the payments to payees that we have seen on ESMA reports, and a list of entities in a list at the bottom left. The donut chart on the page shows how many reports we've received containing data for specific years. The bar chart shows the distribution of all payments to payees by payment categories. And we can also look at individual entities and see how many reports they've submitted and what their total reported amounts are. You'll see some sub tags at the bottom left in the list. So that means that a company was a subsidiary of the parent company, which can be found just above it. So generally, subsidiary companies, this is an important distinction because they don't submit reports. Their parent companies report on their behalf. So the View Reports button, as you might have noticed, disappears when we're looking at subsidiary companies. And just a quick note here again that the sub-tag was added to subsidiary companies with this latest edition that launched in September. The previous version didn't distinguish parents from subsidiaries, which caused some confusion to our stakeholders. So if we go back here to a company that is not a subsidiary and click on the View Reports button at the bottom right, you will be able to find links to ESMA reports that were submitted by the company over the past 5 years. So here on this page, you'll notice some of the same filters as we've seen on the previous pages. So we can isolate by specific years, look at payees or projects, and isolate by geographic region, as well as reset the filters. At the bottom of the page, you can see links to reports this company has submitted within their last 5 available fiscal years. Clicking on the payment data button at the top right will show payments reported by this entity over the last 5 years. And in this view, we can again drill down all the way to the payment categories using the table by expanding its rows. And don't forget that this data, again, is in a table, so we're able to export it to Excel and CSV by clicking on the 3 little dots. There's also a projects page, but I won't spend much time on it because it does look exactly like the payees page. There's just projects instead of payees, but the features are all the same. But there are some other features I'd like to mention. So there's a or info button at the top right that will show some definitions that are handy to interpret the data, and it's available across all of the pages. There's a how-to guide just below the portal. If you scroll down, it's that big hyperlink. And you can download the entire data set in CSV form just under the portal using the download CSV button. So some of the things we're working on currently is we are making some changes to the CSV file. So we just saw that the data behind the dashboards can be downloaded as CSV. So again, in response to some stakeholder feedback, we are making changes to those CSV files to make them less confusing to use for our stakeholders. I say those CSV files because we have a French one and an English one. So some of the things that we're doing here is that we're making it easier to work with the file by fixing some of the headers. We're removing some unnecessary redundancy within the file as well. And we're removing payment value for subsidiaries. As I explained, subsidiaries don't submit reports, so it doesn't really make sense to have payment values besides or on subsidiary rows. And these were actually removed as of last week. We're also removing total rows to make the files machine readable. Which were also removed as of last week. So this is very fresh and very much in progress. So we do have a survey that you might be prompted to complete if you visit our data portal page. So it's actually a 1 on 6 chance to be prompted via our user experience survey when visiting us at the portal. So we encourage you to leave us some feedback. We are continuing to collect it, we are listening, and you happen to be users that we want to hear from. So as you just saw, work was done to address some survey feedback, and we're committed to continue to do so. And again, our agreement with NRCan supports continuous improvement to the platform, so we're engaged and we're listening. So I'll pass it back to Emily now, who will speak about how the data is being used.
All right, thanks, Jacques. So I'll do a quick close here. I just wanted to quickly discuss how we're seeing the data being used before we wrap up. And just at a high level, we've seen the portal being viewed quite a bit. We have over 10,000 views in the last year. And then when it comes to use, the big goal for us in creating this data portal is to make it easier for stakeholders to leverage our data for a wide variety of purposes. Over the years, we've seen it being used by industry to support sustainability reporting, as well as engagement at a community level, at the site level, or point of extraction. Beyond this, we've seen stakeholders use it for many purposes. So that could be research and analysis, contextual information, as well as development programming. We've seen media often reference Estima data as part of reporting on specific projects, or companies, or contributions to specific governments. We've seen civil society use it for research and development programming. So that could be, for example, a study on Ghana's gold sector, or as part of governance programming to increase citizen participation in decision-making. We've seen academia use it for research projects on various issues, so to a specific region or a more global analysis. So more recently, we've seen it being used related to environmental, social, and governance reporting, ESG reporting, as well as to look at payments to indigenous governments. And we've also had increasing requests from governments, including provincial and territorial governments, who are interested in this data, and interest internally within our department, with many teams asking us for demos so that they can use it to support their policy analysis and programming. So with that, I'd like to just quickly wrap up. So in terms of next steps, we have been excited to spend the last 2 days here with all of you. We're very interested to engage new stakeholder groups, including here at the summit. Early next year, we will be hosting the EITI board meeting, the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, that international initiative I mentioned. We'll be hosting the board meeting for the first time in February 2024. And that will be immediately before a major mining conference, the PDAC conference. We're also planning a side event at PDAC related to Canada's responsible business initiatives. And looking ahead, we intend to review some of our guidance related to Estima and our tools. So that's kind of the back end that supports company reporting. And we're looking to increase coordination with other international jurisdictions that implement similar rules. Obviously, we've done a lot of work here in Canada to improve accessibility and compliance, and we'd like to work with our international partners to make sure that this is part of a global standard. And last but not least, I just want to echo something that Jacques said. The data portal will continue to be updated. We continue to collect stakeholder feedback, whether that's through phone calls or through the survey. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your feedback. And we are very interested in ideas to see how we can create more value from the portal as it stands. So with that, just like to thank you for your time. We can take any questions. I know we don't have a lot of time, but feel free to come and grab us. We'd love to chat. Thanks, everyone.
I think it's great work. I have a couple of questions. First one is just sort of compliance percent, and what are the consequences for a company if they don't comply? How does that work? And then the second question is, why do you delete old data? Because to me, it's public data. The company has to post it for 5 years, but once it's public data, we should keep it and we should hold on to it and we should have that historical track record of things.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll start with the second question. That's specified in the Act. So we are, by the Extractive Sector Transparency Measures Act as it was written, so it's part of a piece of legislation, and it says that it only can be public for 5 years, so we're constrained by...
Because what you said before was the Act said you had to post it for 5 years.
Yeah, so...
Be public after that.
Yeah, the information has to be publicly available for 5 years, and we're just using the company data that is publicly available to put on the portal. So we're constrained by those limitations around public availability of the data for the 5-year period. Remind me of your first question, the compliance piece. And so related to compliance, it's the estimate, it comes from the criminal code. So in terms of compliance, if companies have not, done something correctly, not reported, there are fines of up to $250,000 per day per offense. It's quite steep. It would go through the public prosecutor's office. We haven't gone through that yet. We've focused more on supporting companies to comply with our act, but there are quite steep penalties for noncompliance.
Thank you. I was interested in the same question as he had, and I had the same perspective that there's a law that says that the company has to provide it and make it accessible for public consumption for 5 years, but I don't know if there's anything that specifies how long the federal government can hold something and make it public as well. But I'm more interested in how much outside of Canada interest there is in this data, because I think that was actually the original intention of this, is to ensure that governments that Canadian companies deal with, that information is publicly available for those citizens to validate. And if you do any kind of work with those other users in terms of accessibility of the data that you provide.
Yeah, so I would say we're still pretty new, because this portal is pretty new in development in terms of accessibility. Before this, we just had thousands of web links to individual reports, and it was very hard to digest the information. So even answering the question, what payments are being made to X government, was almost impossible. You'd have to go into each report and prepare your own Excel file for that. So it's very new, but we are definitely leveraging our international engagement through the EITI to support that, because that is such a a large forum and opportunity for us. Hosting the board meeting this coming February will be a great opportunity to show off Estima and some of the work that we're doing, so we're planning to do so. Thanks.
So much, and that brings us to a wrap for this session. Yeah, thank you so much. That was really interesting.